Good afternoon. I'm Robbie Cheadle from Robbie's Inspiration, and today I'm going to read you the second part of Chapter 1 from my book While the Bombs Fell, co-written with my mother, Elsie Hansie Eaton. Elsie liked to play with Cousin Joyce, Aunt Alice's youngest child. The Dig for Victory campaign and the fresh produce grown on allotments became a mainstay for many English households. Mother had a good friend, Murray, a cheerful woman with grey curly hair. Her family lived almost entirely off the produce she grew on her allotment. Murray could frequently be found in her tiny scullery, cutting up a huge pile of homegrown vegetables for a stew to feed her family. She had no meat, and this stew would serve as the family's main meal of the day. A family named Williams lived in the other neighbouring cottage. Mr. and Mrs. Williams had a daughter called Margaret. The two girls, being the same age, became firm friends when they were just 2 years old. Elsie toddled down the lane soon after she started walking and came across Margaret playing in the yard of the Williams cottage. Mother had been busy tending to baby Teddy at the time. Mr. and Mrs. Williams also had a large vegetable garden where they grew a variety of vegetables. Mrs. Williams had worked as a cook in a large house before she married. She knew how to make lovely soft bread rolls. She baked these rolls every week in her tiny scullery using an old wall oven which she lit once a week for baking. Elsie loved to taste Mrs. Williams' rolls, which were delicious. She could only have a taste because Mother said that during these times of food shortages, she could not take the food out of the mouths of the neighbors. She could, however, enjoy the yeasty smell of the rolls baking. Elsie's father lived with his family on their farm. Elsie rejoiced at her good fortune. Most of the able-bodied men in the town, aged between 18 and 41 years old, had been called up to fight for Britain in the war. The only men who were not enlisted in the army were those over a certain specified age who worked in essential jobs such as firefighters, medical practitioners, and policemen. The farmers stayed on their land and helped to produce food to feed the nation. At night, before Elsie dropped off to sleep, she listened for the throb of the engines of the German, nicknamed Jerry, bomber planes and the piercing whistle of dropping bombs. The planes terrified her, and she lay worrying that one might drop a bomb on her house. The Germans bombed Bangui in 1940. Reggie said, "The Jerry bomber plane came from the direction of Ersham. It dropped 7 bombs all in a line. The bangs were so loud it hurt your ears, and all the windows in Ersham Street blew out." Ersham Street was about a mile away from Father's farm, so the boys didn't experience painful ears, but Elsie didn't know that. Being only 2 years old at the time, Elsie remembered nothing about the bombing of Bangui. Reggie and Joey told her that the White Lion Inn on Ersham Street and H. Whiteman and Son Limited Furnishers on Trinity Street had both been damaged by bombs. Elsie knew both places. "Flying shrapnel damaged the grandstand," Joey said. This reference was to the grandstand on the football pitch at the public recreation area called the Rec on Ersham Street. Her brother's comments and recently overheard bits of conversation between the adults and her siblings about the devastating impact of the Jerry bombing raids on the nearby city of Norwich stimulated Elsie's imagination. One Tuesday morning in late April, the children woke to the news that the Germans had bombed Norwich during the night. Fires burned in the city. The girls sensed the anxiety and shock of the adults during the days after the bombing raids, and it left them quiet and subdued. That Wednesday night, the Jerry bomber planes returned, wreaking even more damage on the city. Smoke still rose from the rubble when the next attack began. The last bombing raid happened on Friday, 1st of May of that week. When Elsie's grandmother, Granny King, came to visit Mother during that week, she brought news about the bombing of Norwich from old Polly, VC, who lived down the lane. Granny King lived in one of the tiny cottages collectively referred to as the almshouse in the town. A local charity ran the almshouse, which provided accommodation to older adults who could not afford to pay rent. Polly Vesey, a rather eccentric character, always perched a little straw hat on her head. She wore a long black dress that came down to just above her ankles. She made a living laying out the dead, and due to her job, often looked detached from people and circumstances. Granny King told Mother Polly Vesey's news. Norwich is badly damaged. The bombs hit houses, shops, churches and other buildings, even the mortuary. There is no gas, electricity or running water in the city. How are people supposed to manage? The toilets are not working. Polly said women have been coming out of the city at night with their children and whatever they can carry to spend the night in the countryside away from bombing. The news reported similar attacks on English cities of Exeter, Bath, York and Canterbury during this period of the war that the British came to know as the Baedeker Blitz. The attacks on Norwich resulted in a high loss of life due to the concentrated nature of the attacks on bombing residential streets. There had been a lull in enemy air activity over Norwich in the months leading up to the attack. People reacted slowly to the air raid sirens, and some ignored them. The bombing of Norwich impacted the city and the surrounding towns and villages. It took a long time for life to return to normal. I hope you have enjoyed the second part of Chapter 1 of While the Bombs Fell.